Thank you for joining us. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today, we're going to be talking about this year's predictions, some of those neat things we can expect to see on the horizon. Of course, many of us, when we look for predictions, we hope for a lot of good news, and certainly we want to see if we're going to be able to provide that for you today. But on the other hand, if you look for a little bit of adversity, that's not so bad either, after all. If you can prepare for that for a little bit, maybe you can have your eyes wide open to the horizon to see what we can do about it to empower ourselves to make the world a little bit better place. Welcoming us to the Beyond 50 radio program today is our guest, Miss Sonja Grace. Sonja, thank you for joining us here on the program.
Thank you, Dan, for having me back on.
Predictions, you sure like to do a lot of these kinds of things here. Tell us how you got involved in doing this in the first place.
Well, my work as a mystic healer takes me into, all areas of the mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical bodies. And when I'm working with clients and helping them to align the four essential bodies, I'm oftentimes looking at past lives, I'm looking at the present, and I'm looking at the future of what they're creating in their lives. So, the future oftentimes is something that we can predict, but it's also something that is in what I consider a liquid state, and it's constantly readjusting and reformulating as to what is going to gel and become the moment.
Mm-hmm. Now, is it set in stone pretty much? As, of course, you kind of see a prediction or you think a thing's going to go a certain way. It's not really totally set. It's just kind of a good framework or a way that we can expect things to happen, but it doesn't have to be that way, right?
Yes, I feel it's a guideline. And I want to reiterate the point that I just made, is that the future is totally in a liquid form. It is not formulated yet. And it is all of us, all of our thoughts and our actions that are actually creating a strong formed experience that becomes the moment. So if we all stay focused on the things that we really want to see happen in this world, we're more than likely to create that.
Mm-hmm. Now, how has it been for you, especially as this year started out? I know that you work with people from around the world, and they come to you for guidance. What has been really a common theme that you've felt coming through that people really feel they want answered the most?
The common thread that I've experienced so far is we just moved out of the fourth dimension into the fifth dimension, which is a huge deal. I mean, this is like thousands of years that we've been in the fourth dimension, and we just shifted into the fifth dimension. So a lot of people are calling me saying, okay, so I get it now. I need to do my work. I need to figure out what's blocking me. I need to figure out where I'm so in resistance that I haven't been able to move forward in my life. So a lot of people are now coming into that space of wanting to do the deeper work with me and going in and sort of excavating all of the places that they've been resisting and holding energy and, releasing the past, releasing old karmic threads, forgiving the past. I go in and do karma clearing with people so that they can get on with it. But the biggest part about getting on with it is in this fifth dimension, it has to be that we're getting on with it from a spiritual place. We're walking our lives truly connected to the energy that comes down from the universe and the energy that comes up through our feet from the earth, and it completely ignites in our hearts because we are conduits. That's what we are. When we're in physical form, we're conduits for those two energies to meet and totally be expressed at the heart. And as people call me and say, what do? I don't know what my purpose is. I need to have some guidance. I'm really helping them to figure out, first of all, where are you out of alignment in these four essential bodies? And furthermore, what is blocking you in your past to help you get into the moment and experience the moment from a new place? Mm-hmm. And our future and how we want to see our future is defined by what we are putting out there energetically, from our thoughts to our actions.
It's a lot of times difficult for a person to really understand that so from within, so without, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating stuff. Well, that's where the predictions can come in and actually get people to understand, well, this is in front of you. Now that you're prepared, what do you plan to do about it? So let's go ahead and start covering a couple of things here. We have a re-elected president back into office. What do we see here for the next 4 years?
I've been really getting a lot of change happening within this country, and we're facing a lot of big issues that I think in the future are going to push us right up to the line. I mean, we could get very close to a civil war over this gun issue. And I don't see that happening, but I see it being pushed very, very far to where we get to a place that people feel extremely threatened, as many do now. And the thought form, and of course the creation of the future that I would love to see, is that everybody settles down and recognizes that it's not our right to bear arms that is really being threatened. It's all of the other things that we have privilege to that could become threatened. And that everyone can step back and take a breath, because what I see in the future is our president making moves and making decisions that are based upon how to maintain the structure as it is and keep it going. And if it means, more restriction or more boundaries for everyone, then I see that happening. I also, just speaking of this year, see a huge shift politically in October. I'm not going to go into describing what that really is, but I do feel that there's some kind of big shift in politics in October.
Now, is this going to be something that might get us more aware of the fact that we are a country that feels more divided than ever, that we might take a look at this, shake it up a little bit, and come together?
Yes, I see us coming together more. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yes.
So you kind of covered a little bit about guns and what the big deal is there as far as whether or not this is going to threaten our right to bear arms, which is in and of itself kind of an interesting argument, I guess. But what about, mental health? Because that seems to tie right into that.
Absolutely.
I kind of agree when you listen to this gun argument. There seems to be a lot of sense of entitlement, as though the argument immediately surfaces in such a powerful way that, how dare you come in and take away from us, that which we believe we're entitled to have, as though the tragedy itself was non-existent,
Yes.
And so you see sort of a mental health situation going on here where rationality is pretty much tossed out the window, it seems like.
Right. And if you look at other countries, they have different programs and things that are available for mental health problems that our country doesn't have in place. And I think that is absolutely the big issue that needs to be addressed, is how are we caring for our mental health people who need that in this country? Because if we were able to provide that kind of care, we would not perhaps have some of these problems that we've been having. And it's so clear to me in the future that this will be addressed, but it's going to be a long haul, as it has been already. I mean, the whole healthcare issue has been a long haul, and it's still a long haul to get to it. And it's very unfortunate these situations have had to happen in order for that to come to light. But meanwhile, while everybody's, ranting and raving about their right to bear arms, there's other things going on that we're going to be losing if people don't stop focusing on the situation of guns. It's like everybody's fixed on this one topic. Meanwhile, all these other things are happening. So what I've seen in the future is potentially, Americans turning around and going, huh? What happened? Because,
Right.
all these
The
other
great
things.
distraction, in other words.
Yeah, it's a huge distraction. Huge. And I feel that I talked about this with you on past shows, that the duality is really splitting apart. The good is really, really good and the bad is really, really bad, and it just keeps getting further and further apart. And what I'm seeing this year is we will experience, especially, the listeners out there that are really sensitive to this kind of thing, will experience huge pockets of people existing in a reality that we are not a part of, and other people existing in another pocket of reality that group isn't a part of. And I constantly talk about, let's stop the separation, because that's what continues the karmic cycle and all of the pain and problems that we have. But I see this split taking place even more so, and these people will have their reality on it, and these people will have their reality on it, and this is what I see coming to a kind of a crescendo in October.
For those of you just tuning in, we're talking with Sonja Grace, taking a look at our predictions for the upcoming year and taking a look at, how we can actually be involved in what we come to discover as the possibility of what she says is a liquid future that's just kind of in stasis, ready to mold itself. Now, you're so right about, you take a look at, what has been happening and trying to form this together to be able to find all of us coming together on common ground. What is it going to take for us to be able to do that, do you think?
I think it's going to take a whole new approach. They're remaking Star Trek, my favorite movie. They're remaking Star Trek, and it's like this whole new, really fun experience of an old show that we all love and we all watched, many of us, and it's kind of like that. It's like we need a remake. We basically need an overhaul, and I say this from a spiritual place, because I believe that the people of this country, everyone has really the same sets of ideals and goals. They want to live well, they want to have food and clothing and shelter, and they want to be able to have their freedom. I mean, we all want the same thing. We're just coming from different platforms saying the same thing. It's about compromise, but it's also about maybe a new way of approaching some of these things. And I do believe that our current President Obama has a way of creating this for our country, but it is being viewed through old lenses. It's being viewed through the lenses that we've looked through life at in the past. And that's where, there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of anxiety about it. And I don't think I got a chance to say this, Dan, but I do believe, and I have seen this, that Obama is the reincarnation of Abraham Lincoln. Very.
Well, you certainly take a look at a divided country, and it's not too far off the mark when you consider his time.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
It's just like, not to stay on the gun issue, but, it's not hard not to talk about it, but, I take a look at this, and I see that it isn't so much about our right to bear arms that we feel threatened by, but I think what it is, and it's just, me kind of stretching out with an opinion here, that we really feel threatened about our autonomy and our freedom, because we feel that government has gotten to a point that it's dictating too much about what they think we should be experiencing and how we should be living. And this is that last silly little thing that we're going to try to hold on to, rather than being more proactive and infiltrating ourselves into the government body itself and its processes. We've really stood by too passively and allowed this to happen, I think.
Yes, I agree with you. And to add to that, I really believe that until humanity, and I'm speaking about, everybody, people in this country, people around the world, until humanity addresses how heavily addicted we are on so many levels, until we address the addiction and we address the fact that many people are still being led and speaking from that child, that that wounded little child inside of them, we're going to have a tough time sort of having a whole new shift take place, because a lot of these people who are holding on to their guns and saying, I have a right to bear arms, and I'm not saying all of them, but some of them, it's that wounded 3-year-old who had their gun taken away when they were, when they were being scolded. And that's the point I'm making, is that we're missing other things that are taking place because everybody's so fixed on this issue.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to, I feel, stay extremely aware of all the issues and everything that's going on so that we can approach all of this from a larger platform.
Give us an idea of 1 or 2 issues you think are being overlooked as a result of this distraction here.
Well, the biggest one is global warming.
Okay.
I mean, that is a real fact that is moving in on us this year, and I wanted to bring that up about the weather. We're going to have some really extreme weather things going on. Both I've seen Alaska at some point never coming out of darkness. And I don't know if that's going to be, in fact, this year, but I see it coming like within the next, 2-3 years. It's mm-hmm. going to really be a big change in that I feel an ice age is coming, and that's what this global warming is going to result in, is we're going to go back into an ice age.
Ooh, so that means better run out there for them winter cells and make sure that you stay warm?
Yeah, or we all head for Mexico.
Hopefully it'll stay warm enough down there, that's for sure. Then they can start yelling at us about border,
exactly.
regulation and immigration, that sort of a thing there.
Yes.
You didn't want us across your borders. Get the hell out of ours. We know it's cold up there, but live with what you've got to live with.
Yes, that'll be the karmic piece that we get to fulfill with Mexico, for sure.
Now, well, speaking of Mexico, earthquakes. What about that? I mean, you see some pretty devastating things. In fact, just recently I was watching, it was a documentary called The Third Wave, and it was about the devastating earthquake that just hammered away at the coast of India, and taking a look at the fact that here was more than $2 billion raised to be able to help the people in Sri Lanka. And this was a story about 4 people who committed their lives to go to a small village that was a fishing village in Sri Lanka to help try to get these people back on track. And it was incredible to see how these 4 people grew to many, and they were coming up with resources, they were coming up with food, they were building shelters, and they were doing all these marvelous things of their own time and energy. The only money that was coming into this village were from people who came as volunteers from around the world just to see what it was they could do, to make a difference. Mm-hmm. Then it got to a point where, they were actually building out of the library there a really wonderful little hospital healthcare center, and they were treating, hundreds of people daily, for cuts, bruises, sickness, you name it, as they were trying to rebuild this little village. And what was incredible was to see the supplies that were coming in and the human resources that were involved. And then all of a sudden there became this sense of entitlement where all of a sudden, here's a family that's in this camp seeing this other family get money from this nurse's pocket that was donated to her. And so then there came this sort of little bit of a civil unrest, this feeling of, well, we've seen you give it to them. Well, what about us? Like we're suffering more than they were. But as she pointed out, she could have spreaded the money across all these people and it would have done little. So she just kind of would guess, well, I'm going to try to go to this family with what I have and see what I can do with the next thing coming in. Now, what's astounding about this, to me, was all of the abundance that came to this small village that had nothing. Mm-hmm. From these people that set the standard of simply giving their time and commitment to try to better the lives of these people, okay?
Right.
Yet none of that $2.8 billion that was raised worldwide ever even made it into this village or even to Sri Lanka, for that matter.
Wow.
And it was as one guy said toward the end of this documentary, here we are. We have been helped, we have been blessed by these 4 angels and everyone else that came in to do the best that they could do. I mean, they gave up their family lives and times to better our lives. Mm-hmm. Our government never even bothered to come in and help us. Mm-hmm. You know, of course, the crux being, or the underlying theme, everybody can do something. Right. And when you take a look at the earthquakes, it wasn't more than a year later that Haiti's earthquake hit, and there was, you know, at least 3 of these 4 people that went to go take care of that. And we tend to stand by thinking that all these fundraisers, well, you know, I'll go ahead and I'll throw my $1 at a 7-Eleven when I buy my donut. But what do you think about things like that? Are we expecting more natural disasters? If so,
absolutely,
people ante up and get busy.
Yeah, well, we are, and believe me, the sun has not settled down. We're still dealing with, you know, huge corneal mass ejections and all kinds of solar flares, and I feel that this year, particularly in April, we're going to see some pretty big stuff. The Pacific Rim of Fire is constantly in motion, but I think along South America they're going to endure a rather large earthquake this year, and I also see up in Alaska a fairly sizable earthquake. I've seen activity real strong in April, July, and November of this year, and I'm concerned about one thing that I feel, you know, when people think in their minds, well, how can I help or what can I do? You know, be aware of what nuclear power plant is in your area, because that's where I really see the big problem, is not in the earthquake, but in the nuclear power plant that's affected by the earthquake. Mm-hmm. And the New Madrid fault line, which runs, you know, right up through the Midwest and curves up into New England, that's going to go. That one's going to go. And is it going to go this year? I think they could have some pretty significant activity. I don't think this is necessarily the year it's going to go, but when it does, there are some nuclear power plants along the line that could really cause some problems. So I would say to listeners, you know, be aware of what's in your area and become more active in the safety regulations of those nuclear power plants, so that we, at least as, you know, people contributing to this planet, can at least make some kind of effort to keep us all safe.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You know, there's our personal freedom right there.
And not to mention the personal freedom to help others when a disaster like that does strike and you have the wherewithal. You know, again, everybody can do something.
Exactly. Exactly.
I know one of the things that I feel a little bit alarmed about, and hopefully you'll be able to expound on this a little bit, is we're taking a look at flu season. And just recently I was reading, and I've seen this kind of trickle. When you talk about, you know, being distracted by what seems to be a big issue, like, for instance, gun control, you're missing all the really important stuff. And to me, I felt this was pretty important. And that is when you take a look at flu season and everybody, you know, get out there and get your flu shot. Mm-hmm. Me personally, I haven't had a flu shot, I don't think, in my entire life, and I haven't had much of the flu either. But I've certainly been around a lot of people who've had it. But the point being is they're taking a look at this. It's like, you know, sort of you should go do this. It's sort of like I feel like we're being duped into doing this. And this is, again, just my opinion. Mm-hmm. But just recently I was reading how they're working at trying to make this a requirement. Mm-hmm. And that kind of worries me, because what's next when you take a look at some of the other deadly little things that we need to prevent ourselves from getting, you know, like these little viruses that seem to creep over from Africa. Mm-hmm. What do we see here on the horizon as far as biotechnology and things we might want to be aware of?
Well, I did see something rather large happening later in the spring this year in Africa concerning a virus, and that it becomes feared around the world. It certainly wouldn't be the first time, you know, that's happened. But I do see something coming out of there this year that's pretty deadly. I feel that any kind of, you know, you have to have this inoculation is a dangerous subject, and it certainly brings a lot of science fiction movies to my mind. but I don't see it coming. Excuse me, to that point. I don't see it coming to that point where we are required, because certainly there's, enough people out there in the world, myself included, that see a naturopath as opposed to seeing a regular medical doctor. So I don't see it becoming that regulated, but certainly it is stressed. And this is the part that the media plays that I feel is so important to overhaul in time, and that is that if they're not selling a story from a place of fear, the story isn't selling. So everything that's talked about concerning the flu, concerning any of these issues that we're discussing right now are, if you look at it from the perspective of the media, there's a huge amount of fear. And yet we lived centuries ago where, plagues would come and go and people would die, and that was what happened. That was the natural course. Are we all so afraid of death that we just can't stand it? I mean, it's amazing to me how technology and everything else has so helped us, but in the big picture and the big scope of we come in and we leave, and we do this over and over. We have multiple lifetimes. The fear of dying and the fear of anything really horrific like that it paralyzes people. And I'm much more of the mindset that we are a part of this natural process. We come in and we leave, and our bodies go back to the earth. So do I see everybody dying from some virus? No, I don't. I see another big virus hitting Africa and it spreading around the world a little bit and it being very dangerous, but I don't see a lot of people dying from it.
I think, and I wonder sometimes, it isn't maybe the fear of death that people have in as much as the fear of how that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Strange.
I experience a lot of my clients, with the actual fear of dying.
And what do you usually see with something like that?
Well, just a resistance to something that's happening in their lives, or they're constantly busy and doing and filling up their days, and they're terrified to be alone. They're terrified of an illness or a disease. There's just a lot of fear, and I have a tremendous compassion for that because I know how paralyzing that place can be. And I just want to, say to the listeners out there that, we are never alone. I had a woman who was really ill, and she told me that she was crying because she was by herself and she was super sick with the flu. And she said she saw this glowing light in the room, and it was an angel. And the angel said to her, "You're not alone." And she said that just changed her whole experience of what she was going through.
And so now that she knows this, she probably knows now not to do anything embarrassing when nobody's around.
Right. I think she's much more comforted in respect to being alone and having an illness. Yes.
Sonja Grace is with us on the program, Mystic Healer, talking about what we can expect to see coming up this year. And, I know sometimes for a lot of you listeners out there, it might not sound so encouraging, but it all can be. It depends on really your perspective on all of this. As they always seek the seed of prosperity in every adversity. Speaking of prosperity here, we've got the oil industry still again, record profits. Do we expect any kind of devastating natural disasters as a result of these tankers hauling around the much-needed crude that we need here in America?
There's been a lot of problems with that up in the North Sea. I've seen a lot of articles about oil spills up there. What I got when I was looking into the predictions for 2013 is I saw some level of corruption being exposed around, the fall sometime around the oil industry, that there's something that hasn't been quite right that's going to be exposed. And you and I have both seen this trend, since WikiLeaks and all the stuff that's come out where all of these things are being exposed. UFOs, extraterrestrials, whatever it is, there's tons of, the truth that's being exposed, and it's continuing through this year. And I see something coming up that's going to shed some light for all of us on a much deeper level of corruption.
I think what's fascinating too, Sonja, is you take a look at the fact that you see so much of an attempt to control.
Mm-hmm.
And life continually says, when are you going to get it? I am not to be controlled, I am to be allowed, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to show you over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not possible. When you get it, it'll get easier.
Yes. Yes, and that's a great, segue into talking about the earth. We try to control this planet. We do everything in our power to control the weather, to control the every aspect of this planet. We try to control it. And
Mm-hmm.
I tell you, if there's one thing that could happen that would really settle it, is these events that can take place on Earth that let us know we are nothing but a really bad case of fleas. And we can be shaken off at any time.
I'm certain the coastal citizens of New Jersey understood that one, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And my heart still goes out to them, because I know that they're all still trying to recover from this. And the same with Japan. I worry about the people in Japan all the time because of that earthquake and tsunami, and yet I'm also getting that one of the big earthquakes that could come again is to Japan. And I hate to even say that, because I feel so bad for those people having gone through all that they've gone through, but I do feel that that is a really still a weak link of the bigger picture, that fault line is going to go again.
And I hated to seem insensitive when that happened, but I couldn't help but kind of laugh at the irony of that particular disaster with the tsunami and, of course, the nuclear reactors being beat off. But I said, well, they just resurrected the Godzilla industry, so I just couldn't help myself.
No, I know. Well, the thing that's really fascinating, Dan, is all of these things are real big cycles, karmic cycles.
Right.
And we can look back in history at different time periods where, we've experienced the same thing, and we're actually completely lined up astrologically with the same star placement that was taking place when the Civil War happened here in this country. Mm-hmm. And we're watching civil wars take place, all over other countries all around the world. And I just want to say that there are things that will repeat over and over and over again until it's healed. There are karmic cycles that will repeat until they're healed. We've all been in lifetimes over and over where there's war and violence, and it's going to take a lot, and a lot of humanity is really working on this, but it's going to take a lot for us to heal that cycle and get out of that, cycle of violence.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious then if this seems to be parallel to Abraham Lincoln's time that we're in, although we would see it as different just because of the age of technology. What similarities do we see with what's going on here?
Well, I think there's some similarities just in the resistance that the people have to the changes that are being made. But I also felt that when our president was reelected, there was a lot of bargaining. Okay, we'll do this, but you're going to have to do this. Mm-hmm. And, I feel that's really how Washington, D.C. works, is it's a whole series of bargains. I'll do this for you, but you're going to have to do this, this, and this for me. And that's why it doesn't always seem that our president, whoever we're voting for, gets to fulfill the obligations and things that he says he's going to do, because his hands are tied and he's making bargains, because that's how the whole system works. So we're, and with technology and how far we can go into people's lives now, good grief, if we had a camera and the ability to look at past presidents and what they've done or what they were into, I think we'd all be really shocked.
Yes, of course. It isn't Republican, it isn't Democrat, it's just that guy up there.
Exactly. Exactly. The other thing I wanted to bring up is the economy. I know there's been a lot of concern for everybody about the economy, and it looked pretty bleak actually in this month of January. We're almost through January, and February it really does start to get better, and I see the economy on the rise pretty much throughout the year. I see a little bit of a dip in it, maybe more towards the fall, but I don't see anything devastating, and I don't see the housing market going backwards. I see it moving forward, and I feel that we are on the mend.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you say on the mend and the economy getting better, what does that mean? People will start being able to go back to work and that sort of a thing, or what do you see there?
I see a lot more jobs happening and people being able to go back to work about July, midsummer. It's still going to be slow going, but as I was saying, I don't see it going backwards. I don't see us getting worse. I see the economy getting better, and I see us really trying to kind of reestablish things from a more grounded place. It really looks like certain issues will get addressed that need to be addressed, and the economy stays stable.
Fascinating. Fascinating. So how do you feel this year overall is going to be?
I think there's going to be some remarkable things happening. I think that there's going to be huge breakthroughs in nuclear fusion. I think that there's going to be some really big sort of scientific discoveries on solar winds and how to utilize that energy. I think that science is just going to go crazy, and we're going to have some just amazing discoveries. I think they're going to figure out how to get water off of meteors. I think that they're going to, really establish things more so in space than we even thought possible. Thus, I bring up Star Trek again. I really feel we're moving into that kind of an era. And because of this fifth dimension, the thing I would love for people to understand the most from this interview is we're in a higher vibration. So our thought forms are manifesting way faster than they were in the fourth dimension. So we put a thought form out there, and lots of my clients have said to me, "Wow, I was just thinking about you, and not 2 seconds later you called me." And things like that are happening to people, and it's really fast. I put it out there that I wanted to have a new house, and suddenly this person's knocking at my door saying, "Wow, did you know Sue's selling her house?" I mean, those things are just manifesting so quick. And so the way that we're creating our future, I feel we all need to be aware of how quickly we are manifesting what's in our minds, what's in our hearts. And our energy that's going out there in the world is literally the vibration of what molds that liquid form called the future.
So be careful with your thoughts, folks. Make sure that you have the right intention. Fascinating. Well, one intention our listeners can definitely take is jumping on their computer keyboards and typing in your website.
Oh, there you go. It's www.Sonja, Sonja, Grace, GRACE.com.
Very good. Sonja, thank you so much for joining us here on the program today. Again, some rough stuff in there, but for the most part, you see that the seas are going to be somewhat smooth sailing, right?
Yes, I do.
Very good. Thank you again for being on the program today.
Thank you, Dan.
We want to thank you, the listeners out there, for tuning in. Be sure to visit Sonja at SonjaGrace.com and find out individually how things are going to be looking for you. That way you can kind of guide yourself a little better on your own future. Again, so within, then without. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 radio program.